Volume 2, Chapter 25, Plum. We took a breath then, Dr. Frank and I, to sit with Ash's harrowing story up to this point. So many thoughts swirled through my mind that at times I felt as if I were spiraling a magic kind of whirlwind, but at others, I wondered if I could end up circling a drain. By the time the scientist got to this point of the story, I could see how she struggled with what had transpired. Although I was desperate to discover if she completed this request for her creation as Dia requested, if something more dire had happened as a result of it. I also needed to allow her the space to be with all her story must have brought up for her in telling it to another, especially someone she barely knew. It seemed otherworldly, though, to become connected to someone whose story intersected with mine in such incomprehensible and surreal ways. I, too, had been in the woods when I felt no one else could have me. I, too, had lived a life surrounded by the maid and the maker, the parent and the child, and it provoked so many other questions within me regarding responsibility and abandonment. It was hard for me not to find myself struck with compassion for the creature my idol had made. I questioned Dr. Frank's choice to neglect her child in such a rash and impulsive manner. I couldn't help but see her through a new flare of light that cast a shadow over her tale. How was she different from my own mother who left me as a small child? In fact, Dr. Frank was far worse, as there was no one else. As far as she was concerned, that would have cared for this child instead. Not to mention, this child was quite literally made with the doctor's own hand, an intentional sculpting from the materials available. No accident could be blamed for this conception. What did Hannah die for? What was her life worth to Dr. Frank? Perhaps caring for this creature would have been the only thing to make her loss worth something in the end. The entire tale causes me to reflect on other losses, other absences. I'm unclear whether I, too, abandoned my own Ba. Is it possible for a child to abandon a parent? A friend I met while on the streets told me that. Due to the difference in power and responsibility from the one made rather than the one who chose to make a defensive creature they indebted to care for, a child can't abandon a parent. Not only that, but it isn't possible for an adult to abandon another adult. That it is through the role of parent or guardian only that one could be accused of such neglect. Of course, this led me to ponder other aspects of Dr. Frank's story. Can we hold those surrogate parents we meet along the way in our disenfranchised lives responsible in the same way we expect of our birth parents? Am I allowed to cast judgment on Pine for leaving Ash and Dia a great hour of need? Is it morally acceptable for me to hold sympathy for the creature when Dia was responsible for the loss of 2 lives that were innocent of the evil that, nonetheless, Dia punished them for? I blame Ma for leaving us. Her abandonment is a hole carved out of my chest that can never be filled by her or any other ever again. But what is there to say about the loss left by parents who are neither wholly present nor fully absent? What absence is there to be felt by Ba, for example, where marks against my skin were the only sign of what some would consider love? Is the strike of violence from parent and child its own form of abandonment? I found myself moved by Ash's decision, not only to wreak havoc on those who had created Dia, a choice I imagine comes from a most desperate state, but also the demand of Dia parent, the belief that a creature could trust in the very creator who had forsaken Dia. You might ask how I could be so moved by Dr. Frank's story, knowing what I know of it now. I find myself taken by her grief and despair at the actions of her own hands. It's hard to separate from her in the intimate bubble of my apartment, uninterrupted by any intrusions or distractions, to make sense of her own traumatizing choices. Perhaps it's not really about her at all, but about me, and Co, and Ma. If I believe Dr. Frank is capable of remorse for her own wrongdoing, could that mean, somewhere, in some other reality, Ma might also understand what she did wrong, and my heart can finally gain closure? And yet, I find it hard to remain in Dr. Frank's presence without judging her choice, now that we've been through the story long enough to hear the creature's tale of what it is to live a life spurned and rejected. It's something I must come to, sooner than later, to make sense of what she symbolizes, not just for the world, but for my own story, my own mother, my own cursed creation.